Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of TikTok's Everyday Philosophies, where we discuss philosophical concepts in easy-to-digest manner and always relevant to our daily lives. This video discusses quantitative utilitarianism and illustrates how we apply to certain situations the so-called hedonistic calculus. Quantitative utilitarianism is espoused by the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Influenced by empiricism, he argues that moral expressions such as right and wrong must be based on perceptible pleasure and pain. What he means is that moral standards must be empirically verified rather than be conceptually constructed. There must be a tangible basis for someone to know that her action is right and not just a conceptual standard that one can feel good subjectively that what she has done is good. When you are asked, "Are you happy?" Bentham wants a reply that is empirically justified. In his work, Bentham argues that there are two motivating principles of human action, namely, pain and pleasure. He calls these two as the sovereign masters of man. Whatever we do, we always try to avoid pain and achieve pleasure. Hence, the chain of causes and effects are traceable to our idea of pain and pleasure. Our decisions, actions, and efforts are based on pain and pleasure. Someone who does not find basketball pleasurable will never be motivated to dedicate time and resources to practice. Someone who gains pleasure in mathematics, on the other hand, will allot long hours of computing formulas and end up satisfied despite the possible headaches. Thus, the general principle in Bentham's utilitarianism is that pleasure is the only good and pain, without exception, is the only evil. Just like what we already discussed on the general introduction to utilitarianism, the goodness or wrongness of action depends on the pleasurable or painful consequences of an action. Any pain, according to Bentham, is evil. So, no matter how you sugarcoat it, your ex who cheated on you did something evil on you. Hence, the goal of our actions is always to increase pleasure and lessen, if not eliminate, pain. If this is achieved, then we can say that we are living a happy life. With these principles, interpreters of Bentham deduce two forms of hedonisms contained in his ethical system. The first is psychological hedonism. We move according to perceived punishment or reward. Contemporary neuroscientific findings will agree on Bentham on this. The mind acts depending on the stimulus it perceives. Thus, a teacher who thinks that his students are not performing well may also want to ask whether he makes his lessons pleasurable or painful to them. The second is ethical hedonism. The general rule of utilitarianism is that pleasure is the only good and pain is the only evil. As a consequentialist theory, the moral worth of an action depends on whether an action maximizes pleasure and minimizes pain. An action is right if it is able to achieve it, and an action is wrong if pain is maximized and pleasure is minimized. The question of Bentham now is, so how do we know if the pleasure is maximized and pain is minimized? Earlier, we said that Bentham wants an empirical explanation to such questions. Hence, he formulated the philosophic or hedonistic calculus. The goal of this calculus is to provide tangible standard to judge whether an action brings pleasure and avoids pain. So, he gives the following criteria. Intensity. How strong is the pleasure that an action will render? Duration. How long does the pleasure last? Given two choices, for example, the option that will give more long-lasting pleasurable feeling is better than that which can just give short-lived happiness. Certainty or uncertainty. How likely or unlikely will the pleasure occur? Which is more certain to happen? Pain or pleasure? Propinquity or remoteness. How soon does the pleasure arrive? A delayed gratification with higher uncertainty to happen is less preferable to that which can be done now and is very likely to yield pleasurable results. Fecundity. Will the decision yield similar pleasurable effects? For example, skipping a class may give you an immediate, certain pleasurable feeling because you can attend to your other hobbies while doing classes. But the pleasure you get from that is not fecund because the consequences that will follow may be painful. Missed lectures can result to poor performances in quizzes, and poor performances in quizzes can eventually lead to failing the course. Purity. Similar to fecundity, we have to ask what is the probability that the action is followed by the opposite kind. If your action has a high probability that pain will follow after an immediate experience of pleasure, then that happiness is not pure. And lastly, extent. How many people are affected? Remember that utilitarianism aims to maximize happiness for the greater number of people. An action that will benefit greater number of people will produce greater number of happiness. So let us review our trolley case and apply Bentham's calculus after. Suppose you are the person in charge of the malfunctioning controller of the raging trolley. On the one end, there are 5 elite, highly trained soldiers out to catch a terrorist about to drop Atomic Bomb 2.0 that can wipe out more than half of the world's population. And on the other end, there is one scientist who knows the formula for the much-awaited COVID-19 medicine that is continuously killing millions of people around the globe. Where will you direct the trolley? To solve this case, let us apply the philosophic or hedonistic calculus. Now, let us recall our criteria. And then, we calculate. Between saving the highly trained soldiers and the scientists, which will produce strong pleasure. Remember that while it is true that COVID-19 is continuously killing millions, vaccines are starting to roll out already. What the scientist has is a medicine to treat COVID-19. Hence, there is already an ongoing solution to the problem. Whereas, the terrorist who will drop Atomic Bomb 2.0 will endanger great number of people and only the elite force can stop him. Hence, to save the soldiers has greater intensity. For duration, we can say that both options will bring long-lasting pleasure. The availability of vaccine plus medicine will be a big relief to people worldwide. In the same way, to catch the big-time terrorists will give us peace of mind. Which of the two options is more certain to bring pleasure? Again, we can say both. The scientist is certain of his findings, and the military force finally putting the terrorist in his rightful place will certainly bring pleasure. For propinquity or remoteness, we ask, how soon does the pleasure will occur? Well, the scientists will undeniably give us relief. Stopping the terrorists will give us more immediate happiness. For one, the medicine will still undergo trials and seek approval. If the terrorist is not apprehended, millions would have already died by the time the medicine is approved. So, we give it to the highly trained soldier, therefore. Which of the two options will yield similar pleasure? We again say, both. In these two situations, the consequences will be a set of pleasurable sensations. For purity, where we ask which action will not have an opposite situation to the intended pleasurable effect, we can again say that both can yield pure pleasurable consequences. The last category is extent. In both situations, millions of people will benefit. But as we have already pointed out, vaccines are already being distributed worldwide. While it is not a medicine against COVID, it can already help in controlling the spread of the virus. Hence, given the situation, saving the highly trained soldiers will yield greater pleasure for the greater number of people. As we see here, we use the criteria set by Bentham to decide which of the two equally important decisions can be given priority. All things considered, therefore we say, saving the soldiers will bring more pleasure. To save them and sacrifice the scientists is the ethical thing to do. Thus, we see how we can apply Bentham's quantitative utilitarianism in moral dilemmas. You can also try the exercise by choosing dilemmas and doing the hedonistic calculus. That's it for this presentation. In the next episode, we will be discussing the qualitative utilitarianism of John Stuart Mill. Thank you for another philosophizing time here at TikTok's Everyday Philosophies.